Hey everybody, and welcome to my birth vlog. Little man is eating, so I'll show you him in a minute. But this is going to be the story of giving birth to my third baby. And it was a fast one and it was a wild one. And it did not go according to plan. So grab a cup of coffee and fasten your seatbelts. I did vlog the first portion of this story. So I will start with those video clips now, and then I will chase it with story time of how it all ended up ending, because it went way too fast and furious for us to have captured any of the actual deliveries. So here we go. It's 3 o'clock in the morning on Thursday, April 28th. And for the past, 4 hours, I've been having extremely painful contractions. They're still irregular. They're happening anywhere from like 8 to 16 minutes apart. But the pain is something, it's just different. These feel very, very different. And I'm feeling just ragingly burning pain in my low back, which is how I felt contractions with my son, my last kid. I'm getting another one right now. Hold on. I'm gonna get into the bath and hope that they either continue or they stop so that I can get some sleep. Because as it stands, these are way too painful for me to sleep through. So here we go. So a little update. It's now 3:57 in the morning. It's been about an hour. I just took a bath, and my contractions are coming anywhere from 5 to 8.5 minutes apart now. They're all under 10 minutes apart. They're becoming a little more consistent. The sensations I'm having are still the same. So I think I will go into the living room now and just bounce on my ball in the dark and do a little bit of yoga. And if they continue at this pattern, I'm going to try to lay back down and get some rest and assume that this may be the start of something. The last time I went through this, my contractions got tighter in the bathtub, and then I went to the living room to bounce on my ball and do yoga, and everything spaced out. And it didn't lead to anything. So this is sort of my test to see if this is actually it or not. So wish me luck. So just a little update. It is now 8 o'clock in the morning, and my contractions got down to 2 to 4 minutes apart. And then at 4:30 in the morning, my son woke up from a nightmare, and I went in to comfort him, and it shut down my contractions entirely. And now I'm getting like 1 per hour since 6 a.m. And I will say they are active labor intense. They are active labor contractions I'm getting, like mega back labor, like I've gotten with my other kids. So I feel like we're about 24 hours away from having a baby. I just don't know when it's going to happen, and I am so frustrated right now with this start and stop situation. So I think our plan today is I'm going to work a little bit, and then we're going to go grocery shopping. We're going to power clean the house. We're going to get everything ready and set up. Hopefully that will kickstart things, and if it doesn't, at least we will have the house in order. And then I have my midwife appointment tomorrow at 11 a.m. And I'm going to ask her to check me then and do a membrane sweep if things are favorable. And hopefully, if I haven't already gone into active labor by then, hopefully that will start this show on the road, because I cannot do again what I did last night and this morning. These contractions are now unbearable. Like, they are to the point that I need to be in the hospital, and I need to be like working toward having a baby and not doing this BS of just getting contractions for nothing. So that is the update for now. I am working at the moment. I have my morning meeting in about 20 minutes, and then we are going to start this day and see what happens. So maybe we can do a little bit of vlogging and maybe not. I don't know, but stay tuned. So just a little update. I'm in my laundry room and the laundry's running. So sorry for the noise, but it is now like 12:15 in the afternoon. My contractions have picked up again. They're coming every 8 to 9 minutes. So my husband and I, we deep cleaned the house, and now we're going to drive to the city 45 minutes away and do our grocery shopping and pick up my mother-in-law from the hospital where she works afterward. And then we're going to come back up here and we will just assess the situation as it unfolds. But it looks like contractions are picking back up again. I'm hoping to get a little bit of rest in the car. I'm hoping that walking around in the grocery store will keep things going. And then, yeah, I will check back in when there's another update. But that's what's going on now. Yes.
So just stay calm, breathe.
Deep freezer bag, a bucket, and there's one banana behind the cereals that I've been hoarding. Can you bring that too?
Inte krysta mig igen.
No. No. It's a lot of pressure, but it's not that type of pressure yet. So we left off in the story of us just hauling ass to the hospital. But I want to take a couple steps back and just sort of fill in some gaps. So the day prior to all of this happening, I had just turned 39 weeks pregnant, and I decided to film the symptoms portion of my 39-week pregnancy update that day on Wednesday, instead of doing it on Friday, which is when I normally film, because that's when I have my midwife appointments, and I like to put all of that information into my weekly updates. But I don't know, call it a gut feeling, but I just thought it was a little risky for some reason to not film my symptoms portion right away. So I filmed that on Wednesday, and then I uploaded it on Thursday morning after having the night I had previously, because I just wasn't sure what was going to happen. I didn't know if the baby was going to be born on Thursday or if this was just another case of prodromal labor and, you know, we were going to carry on and continue onward to my due date. But when I filmed that video on Wednesday, I genuinely thought I was going to go to my due date, because for the 4 whole weeks prior, I was getting prodromal labor daily. But for the couple days leading up to my 39-week update, I didn't have any prodromal labor at all. The only thing I had was I lost my mucus plug on the Monday and Tuesday of that week, and he was born on Thursday. But I had lost my mucus plug back when I was 35 weeks too, and back when I found out I was like 2 centimeters dilated and 85% effaced, and that didn't lead to anything. So I didn't think anything of it. But I guess you could say that was my only sign that labor might be on its way, is that my prodromal labor stopped. And my mucus plug left. We did everything I said we were gonna do in those vlog clips. We cleaned the whole house, we tied everything up with school and work, we each got all of our to-do lists handled, and it was literally like the second I finished cleaning the kitchen, I had just shut the dishwasher door and pressed the button when I got a contraction, and it was like 11:50 a.m., okay? I was not timing them still because I, again, was only getting like 1 contraction per hour leading up to this. But then, very shortly afterward, I got another contraction. And again, for some reason, I decided, okay, I think I'm going to start timing them because those seemed pretty tight together, and I want to see what the difference is in like contraction gaps, because these were strong contractions. They were not just like Braxton Hicks or whatever. They were enough to make me think, these are intense and they're suddenly close together. So that was at 12:03 p.m. And this is a screenshot of the very beginning of my contraction timer app record. 12:03 p.m., I timed that second contraction. My husband was out cleaning the car when this all went down, and I needed to get into the shower because the plan was now that we were going to drive to Alingsås, we were going to do our grocery shopping, we were going to get some lunch, we were going to walk around, we were going to try to get my contractions going, and then at 3 p.m., we were going to pick up his mom from the hospital she worked at down there because she volunteered to come up and be with us for the rest of the day, through the night and into Friday, because she didn't have to work on Friday, just in case labor actually did start. Like, we all kind of sensed that it was going to happen. We just didn't know when. So we were like, this is fantastic, because they live like an hour and a half away from us. So it was always a logistical worry of mine that by the time we decided, okay, my contractions are regular and strong enough that, yeah, we should tell them to drive all the way this way to come up. And then we have like an hour to go to get to the hospital. It's like a lot of time of waiting once we get to the point where we decide, okay, this is actually the real thing. So it was a relief for me to think, yes, we're going to have her up here so we can go to the hospital whenever we need to. My kids will be taken care of. So I jump into the shower, and I'm telling you guys, I wash my hair, I shave head to toe, like I am getting ready either for war or for a ball. I don't know, but like I knew something was going to happen. And while I was in the shower, contractions were consistently 8 to 9 minutes apart. Out of nowhere, they just become regular, and they're strong. And so when my husband comes in, I look at him and I'm like, dude, I think this could be it. So he says to me, are you sure you want to do grocery shopping? And I said yes, because I was convinced my contractions were going to slow down when we got into the car. We pack up, we hustle into the car, and contractions got a little, spotty there, a little here and there for those first couple minutes in the car. But then all of a sudden, they get down to 5 to 6 minutes apart, and they're coming consistently. And we decide grocery shopping is off the table. So my husband calls my mother-in-law and tells her, pack up, get ready to go. We're coming to get you immediately because we think this is it now. And while he's on the phone with her, I decide to crawl my big pregnant body into the back seat of the car because I cannot take these contractions in the bucket seat passenger side of my car. I was having to like flip over and get onto my knees for each one, and it was such an ordeal. I just couldn't do it anymore. So now I'm in the back seat. I'm on my knees. I'm sort of draped over the back seat of the car, and I'm holding on to this grate that separates the trunk from the seated part of my car. And each time I had a contraction, I just had this compulsion to sit into it. So that is how I basically ended up doing my whole labor, is in that position, doing that thing. I was very limited in what I was able to do, but in retrospect, I don't think I would have done anything different anyway. I was having intense back labor, you guys. I had the same thing with both of my other kids. And I knew for a fact that this kid was not posterior. I know they say that back-to-back, sunny side up babies cause most cases of back labor. This guy was in a perfect position. He was left occiput anterior. That's the position they want the baby to be in. I had just had a growth scan and he had not moved. I was still getting kicks and everything in the same places. His head was locked, loaded, and engaged in my pelvis. He was not moving anywhere. So I don't know what the deal is, but it just seems to be that with all of my kids, I get back labor and it is intense. So whenever I get a contraction, the thing that helps the most is for someone to put all of their weight into pressing on my sacrum. I call it my off button, okay? It easily reduces the pain in half of what I experience. But here I am in the back seat and my husband is driving the car and I have nobody to give me counter pressure. So it starts off already super gnarly and intense. We left the house at 12:30. And by, just several minutes into the car ride, I'm getting contractions 5 to 6 minutes apart, and then they drop down to 3 to 4 minutes apart. They were 3 to 4 minutes apart from halfway to picking up my mother-in-law until we get to the hospital. Every 3.5 minutes, I get a contraction that lasts 1 to 1.5 minutes long. So I'm getting like 2 minutes break in between. And I have nobody to give me back counter pressure for my back. It was intense. Anyway, we haul tail down to Alingsås. We get my mother-in-law. And then my husband is like hauling tail to get back to our house. He told me he was going 160 kilometers per hour. That's like double the speed limit here, okay? But thankfully, while my mother-in-law is in the car, she's able to give me counter pressure. So I did have a little bit of help for that third of this whole labor ordeal. But we get home, she gets out of the car. She is going to stay home, take my husband's car to pick up our kids from preschool. And my husband and I then carry on and go to the hospital. So before we left our driveway, I got another contraction. And I thought for sure my husband would put the car in park and give me some counter pressure for my back in this moment. But he was on the phone with labor and delivery to tell them that we were on our way and it was going quick and they needed to be ready. And so when I told him, Yuan, I'm having another one, and I'm expecting him to stop the car while he's on the phone and give me counter pressure, he instead steps on the gas and takes, a 90-degree turn onto the street to start our journey to the hospital. And while he's on the phone, I was taken aback by the strength of this contraction and was taken aback by not getting the relief I was hoping to have. And I had a very vocal contraction in this moment, okay? And I say that because my husband was on the phone with labor and delivery, and they must have heard this. And that will play into the story later, so just tuck that away in the back of your mind. Anyway, so we are now on the way to the hospital, right? And I am just struggling to breathe through these contractions because I have no one to help me with the back labor. It's the back labor that was just unbearable, okay? I mean, when I had it with my other kid at this stage, when it was this bad, we were at the hospital and my husband was like digging his whole elbow into the small of my back. I had that counter pressure and that support and that help. I don't know if it actually took away any of the pain, but just having that sensation there helped. I had nothing though. And not only that, but I'm in a freaking car. If you guys have ever taken contractions in a car, you will know it's not a good time at all. It is very less than ideal, okay? So we are hauling butt. It should take us an hour to get to our hospital going the normal speed limit. But we got there in exactly 30 minutes. So we finally get there. Actually, let me take a step back because 15 minutes out from getting to the hospital, I started going through transition. And I know this because my contractions started to feel completely different. I felt them in my pelvic floor, okay? More so than ever. I felt that pressure that was going to be opening me those final centimeters. And also, I tried to Kegel through one of these contractions, and I just felt this density. The head was not, I wasn't 10 centimeters, the head was not in my, birth canal, but I was starting to feel all that pressure. So I know his head was just, right there and super low. And so it was at that point that I told my husband, I'm like, look, I don't want to sound melodramatic in this moment, but my contractions are changing, and we have very little time.
Get me to the hospital right now.
So he flies into the parking lot. We went diagonally into a couple parking spaces. He didn't even pay for parking. It was a whole scene, okay? And so he runs out of the car. He opens my door. I spill out onto the ground on my hands and knees, just in desperation to get out of the car and into that hospital. And bless my husband's heart, he gets my labor and delivery bag out of the trunk as if I'm going to even have this beautiful, peaceful water birth that I had envisioned with all of my aromatherapy and my candles and my music that I had packed in this labor and delivery bag, as if we were even going to open it, okay? So I have this contraction, and then I get up and we're making our way to the front, to the doors of labor and delivery. You have to press the button and announce who you are before they will open the doors for you. They stay locked 24/7. And so my husband asks me, can I go ahead of you to press this button and get the process going? I'm like, yes, go. I just had a contraction. We have time. I'm just going to slowly make my way to the door. You go ahead. But of course, mid parking lot, like literally in the street where you drive in and you enter the parking lot, I'm in the middle of the street, I get a contraction and I cannot take it standing. I have nothing to hold on to. All I can do is fall to my hands and knees. And I had this cathartic moment. It was so dramatic, but just finally being at the hospital, knowing I'm safe, knowing we made it, being out of that godforsaken car, and I get this contraction. It's just a very vocal thing where I fall to my hands and knees and I just let out this roar. It was a lot of built up stress and pain and anxiety and relief, everything all mixed together. Now, going back to the hospital, having heard me have a similar contraction in the car when we left to go to the hospital, having all of that as a preface, the last thing I saw before I closed my eyes for a while was looking up and seeing my husband come back toward me as he realized I was like on the ground in the parking lot, and also looking through the glass walls of labor and delivery and seeing this mass of blue heading toward the door. The hospital staff all wear blue. I didn't think they were coming for us. For some reason, I thought that I saw them push a wheelchair, even from that distance. I thought they were just pushing someone who had just given birth to the recovery suite. That was what was going through my head in that moment. But according to my husband, they were waiting there. They were there when he pressed the button. And when they saw me drop, they came running. And he said they addressed him as Yuan, and they knew I was Megan. So he thinks that they were actually there waiting for us because he told them we would be there in 30 minutes, and we made it in 30 minutes. And here we are, this circus, just this hot mess coming in. And they came running with this wheelchair. And they tried to hustle me into this chair. It was so difficult. I begged them to let me just finish the contraction on the floor. Understandably, I couldn't. And they didn't know how dilated I was, so they hustled me into this chair and we go running to the labor and delivery room. They just bypassed triage entirely. So we get in the room. My eyes are still closed, but they gave me the nitrous gas. And they tell me that they are going to take off my pants. They need to check me and see where we're at. So I say, okay. So they roll me over onto my back. Awful position to be in when you're having back labor. And I get my first cervical check, and it was rough. I feel her really digging in there. And I'm thinking, I panicked a little because I'm like, man, she's struggling to find my cervix. It seems like it's really high. Maybe it's hard to even feel how dilated I am. Maybe I'm not dilated at all. That's what happened with my last baby. I had back labor. Those contractions felt intense. So we booked it to the hospital, and I was only 2 to 3 centimeters dilated. They let me stay though because I was 100% effaced and it was empty at labor and delivery. So they just let me stay. But I was like, oh my God, I'm still only 2 centimeters dilated. Oh my God, what am I gonna do? I'm already queuing up an epidural in the back of my head. F this. If I am not at least 5 centimeters dilated, there's no way I can do this naturally because these contractions are mega. But I hear in Swedish this midwife, who turns out to be a student midwife, telling my actual residing midwife that she felt the head and that it felt soft, that my cervix felt soft. I didn't hear her say any dilation. I was afraid I was nothing dilated, you guys. So then my actual midwife then checks me, and she comes up to my bedside and she goes, I've got good news for you. You're 8 centimeters dilated. The head is right there. So let's go ahead and do a trace of the heart and see how that's going. And then we will just continue. Mind you, we got to the hospital at 2:16. We got checked into the room at 2:20. So I was 8 centimeters at 2:20. My contractions, I started timing them at 12:03. So we're 2 hours and change into this process, okay? So I get back on my hands and knees and they're looking for the heart rate. And they tell me after I get through a contraction, they're like, we actually need to break your waters right now and put that scalp electrode in the baby's head to get a more accurate reading, they said, we found a heart rate, but it's really low and we don't know if it's your heart rate or the baby's. And I'm like, oh, that sounds terrible. So, okay, do it. I was a little bummed because with my other babies, once my waters broke, the baby was born like within 30 minutes. So I knew it was going to go super fast and I knew it was going to get mega intense. And I hadn't had a chance to get like my bearings about me yet. I had just survived this car ordeal and now I'm just starting to open my eyes from the relief of just being in this room and trying to find my safety in this space. I noticed I was in the same room that I had given birth to my other two babies in, which meant there was a labor pool. And so I had asked them, once you do this whole thing, please, I want to get into the tub. I want to get into the tub now. And they're like, oh, did you want to give birth in there? I'm like, yes, it's like the first thing on my birth plan. If I'm allowed to, I want to give birth there. I saw this look on her face like, okay, and she, bless her heart, she went and she started the tub. They told me afterward, though, that they did that just to placate me because they knew that there was both going to be no time to get me into the tub and also that there was going to be no possibility for me to birth in there, though, because of what ended up happening. So they broke my waters. They placed the scalp electrode. I immediately spin back around because I get another contraction in that moment. I spin around to get off my back because let me just tell you all, back labor contractions on your back after your water breaks, when you're in transition, it's not compatible with life, okay? Like, it's impossible. They would have had to pin me down to keep me on my back for that contraction. So I spun around quickly and I took that contraction. Once I got to this point, the surges were so intense that I did the same thing I did in my second baby's birth, like labor, which was that they get so intense that no amount of breathing or movement or sound or moaning or anything is going to help me cope through it. The only thing that actually helps me in this instance is to go completely dead still and quiet. I described it similarly in my last birth story, which is that it's sort of a form of rebellion, where the only thing I can do to fight back against how intense these contractions are is to surrender to them. And that's what I do. So I went dead still, dead quiet. And I say that because everyone else was dead still and dead quiet. Everyone was looking at the heart rate monitor. And it's one of these monitors where you can see the beats per minute and you hear a beep for each heartbeat. So it's like beep, 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 with the heart rate. So they're all looking and we can all hear as my contraction starts and gets really heavy, that beep, beep, beep goes beep, beep, beep. It gets so slow. And I looked up at the monitor and it went from 145 beats per minute at the top of my contraction, or I guess at the bottom of my contraction, to at the peak of my contraction, his heart rate went to 49 beats per minute. And it stayed there until my contraction stopped and his heart rate recovered as my contraction slowed down. And the midwives are like, not comfortable with this. So someone presses the button and eventually a doctor comes rushing in. And in that time, I have another contraction on my knees, hands and knees, and the same thing happens. So now it's all this hustle and bustle. And they're like, look, the baby's not tolerating your contractions for some reason. And so we're definitely going to want to change position. And the doctor is going to do a procedure because we don't know how long the baby's heart has been decelerating. It could have just started right now. Especially with the water breaking, or it could have been doing this for hours. We don't know. So we need to do this procedure. So the doctor explains it to me. She says, I need to take a blood sample from the top of your baby's head. I'm going to check the blood gases. Now, no one went into details and I haven't Googled it, but from what I gather, it's probably to check to see if his blood has adequate oxygen levels. Because I'm assuming if he's decelling, their biggest concern is making sure his brain is not being starved of oxygen. So there I am on my back again, and they're just like trying to pep me up by saying, think of the baby, it's for the baby. And I'm like, this is not helping. That's making me more stressed. And so they do the blood sample, okay? And then I roll over to my side and I immediately have another contraction. And at the end of this contraction, I compulsively pushed. And so I thought, thank God, we're getting this show on the road, right? So my midwife is like, all right, let me check you just to make sure. So she checks me while I'm on my side and she goes, okay, you're 10 centimeters, baby's coming, but you have a cervical lip, which is when a little piece of the cervix gets stuck ahead of the baby's head instead of being behind. And so there's risk of it swelling as you're pushing baby out, and that can prevent baby from coming out. So she tells me, in your next contraction, I'm gonna hold that lip back behind your baby's head so that, it can get so it can get tucked back there or whatever. So now I'm having a contraction with her hand up there holding this lip behind. I know this is a somewhat common thing. I've heard it in a bunch of birth stories. I'm now honored to say I know what it feels like. So that will bring new flavor to future birth stories that I listen to where they say that they have someone holding a lip back for them, because man, it sucked. And it's the back labor, and even though I'm on my side, no one's giving me counter pressure, and oh my God, it was just so intense, you guys. So she clears that lip. But then the doctor comes back to me and says, okay, she's like, I wasn't able to get an adequate sample to test for the blood gases, but according to the midwife, these 2 contractions you've had have moved the baby's head really well. So we're just going to proceed and we're going to try to get this baby out, but we got to get him out now. The number one thing on my birth plan, besides wanting a water birth, was that I did not want anyone to coach me with pushing. I wanted the room to be calm, quiet, peaceful. I wanted to listen to my body and I wanted to push at my own pace. Granted, that's with the caveat that there was no medical necessity. So I understand, and I was totally fine with things going the way they were going given the circumstances at hand. But I just had to laugh at myself in my head because I'm like, yeah, they say third babies are the wild card. They're the unpredictable birth, and that is exactly what is happening to me right now. Never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that this is how it's going to go with the car and the D cells and the cervical lip. And now they roll me onto my back and put my legs up in stirrups, and I have 8 people down at my vagina. I've got 2 doctors. I've got 4 midwives over here. I've got a midwife at each side of my head. Everyone's conflicting voices of encouraging me, cheering me on, and then also you've got to push, you think of your baby, you've got to get him out. There was so much noise. But I do remember hearing my husband, and he spoke to my heart. I heard him, and it was him that got me through it because he knew just what to say to me. And I don't even remember what he said, but he was encouraging me, but then he was also telling me, you got to do this thing, Megan. And hearing that reality in his voice, it got me through the moment. It was so helpful because everyone else is yelling at me and trying to encourage me or trying to get me to push this baby out. But it was so much, okay? I didn't have a chance to really absorb what was going on in the moment. So they roll me over and I take that first contraction. And that's when I remember hearing my midwife down there saying, Megan, you've really got to push. You think of your baby. You got to get this baby out. And I will admittedly say that I held back on that contraction and I pushed a little bit, but I mostly only just let my body do the pushing because I just needed a minute. I needed a minute to collect myself in this moment. Then I got the next contraction and I'm like, okay. And that's when I heard my husband's voice and I'm like, all right, I got to do this thing. So I gave it a really solid push, not 100%, but I would say maybe 75 to 80% pushed. And the baby was crowning at that point. And they asked me, do you want to feel the head? And I'm like, no, I have a job to do here. Don't distract me. I didn't say that, don't worry. I was so concerned though, because this was how my daughter's birth went. I birthed her on my back. I rushed her out. I misunderstood what they were telling me to do with pushing. I thought I had to get her out ASAP, and I tore in so many places. And this is why I've said in all my subsequent birth plans that I didn't want any coached pushing. I just wanted to follow my body's cues because I was so scared to tear again. And now here I am in a circumstance where they're telling me I have to push for my baby's life. This is coming off the heels of them telling me all throughout my pregnancy that my baby looks like it's huge. You know, I'm measuring a month ahead or whatever. And I don't know, it was really hard for me to do what was required of me in that moment because I was so scared I was going to tear. But the baby's crowning, and honestly, like that next contraction I got, I gave just as much of a push. Like I wouldn't say I gave it 100%. I kind of reserved a little bit because I wanted my tissues to have a little bit of a chance to stretch. But my body, dude, you guys, like my body just went into hyperdrive on that third contraction, and the baby came out in just that one push. That third push. And because I hadn't been in labor all that long, I still had a lot of energy. I was very lucid. I was very aware of what was going on. I wasn't falling asleep between contractions like I was in my last birth. And because of that, I just remember being very, very aware and seeing in my mind's eye the baby coming out, because I could feel every bit of his anatomy come out. And I don't remember feeling any pain in that moment. I'm sure it was there because I remember also thinking like, this is the most intense sensation of my life. I'm never doing this again. But in reflection, I don't remember feeling that pain. I just remember feeling every part of his anatomy coming out very quickly, but gently at the same time. I remember feeling them sort of help jostle his shoulders out at the very end, and then he was out. And it was this just insane relief, okay? Physically, mentally, spiritually, that feeling of like, oh my God, it's over. And oh my God, I dodged a cesarean. No one said that a C-section was on the plate, but I got the sense that if I didn't get this baby out, they were going to take him because it was for the safety of the baby. I avoided like an episiotomy and forceps and any other kind of intervention to get him out. Like the relief at all angles was insane. And so, and then he came out crying right away, and they put him on my chest. And I just remember looking around the room, my jaw was on the floor, like my eyes were the size of saucers, just trying to find someone to help me ground myself and like help me to realize what just happened. It happened so quickly. So he was born at 3:05 p.m. So that was, and we were checked into the room at 2:20. So that was 45 minutes after we got into the room, he was out. And altogether it was, 12:03 was that one contraction that I timed, and then he was out at 3:05. So it was like 3 hours from start to finish of when my contractions became timeable again. And he was not a big baby, you guys. He was totally average. He came out. Let me show you guys him. Here is little Benny. He's milk drunk. He came out weighing 3,215 grams, which is 7 pounds and 1 ounce. He had a 35 centimeter head circumference, which is perfectly average. And thank goodness, because he was also born with a nuchal hand, which is his hand was up here. So he came out with his head and his hand up like this. And they told me that before they assessed me for tears. And I was just like, oh man, R.I.P. vagine. Like, nice knowing you. Nothing is ever going in or out of you ever again, because I'm sure you are shredded. But I only had a 1st degree tear. It was so small on my perineum. They said I didn't need stitches, but I told them they could give them to me. And I have not felt it since. Like even peeing right after birth, no burning, no nothing, it's like they could have just told me it was not there at all. I have not felt any discomfort from this. So win, because I was so scared I was going to tear, having to launch out a big baby, but he did no damage to me whatsoever. So, It was a wild ride, you guys, with literally the wild ride of getting to the hospital and then just how quick everything went and all of the things. It was a lot. I can say that while I would classify it as my hardest pregnancy, just from the standpoint that I had so many weeks of prodromal labor, and I did have that Down syndrome scare at the beginning of the pregnancy, which was really difficult waiting for my genetic test results to come back. And while I can say for certainty that this was the wildest birth I've had of the three, it has been the easiest recovery I have ever had. I have not had even one tiny shred of baby blues, let alone any indication of postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. By this point, at 10 days, 11 days postpartum, I was definitely like not feeling good with my last two kids. Like very emotional, very depressed, lots of anxiety, crying at everything, feeling like I had made a huge mistake by having another baby, terrified that life would never be the same, wanting to, just all those terrible, terrible feelings that can come with the blues, the baby blues, and with postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. I feel like I came home from the hospital and was just back to my normal life. I had 2.5 days of bleeding. That's it. Now, the afterbirth pains were intense, and I had those for about 4.5 days. But bleeding, like, just stopped immediately. I mean, I have been, like, passing fluid, like that afterbirth type fluid, but it's not blood. And I have had a little bit of breakthrough bleeding recently because I've just been doing too much in the house. But for all intents and purposes, no pain, hardly any bleeding. My mood feels amazing. I am exclusively nursing this baby after completely failing with breastfeeding with my first and having to exclusively pump with my second. I not only have enough of a supply to feed this guy who is gaining weight every day. We're back to birth weight already. And we avoided jaundice this time because of all of that colostrum I expressed. I was able to stay on top of his jaundice because he was getting it. It took my milk 6 days to come in this time. It took my milk 5 days last time. So it took me even longer to get my milk this time. But I knew how to hand express the colostrum postpartum, and I also had my syringes from antenatal expressing, and I was able to keep him fed and hydrated, and we avoided jaundice. And not only all of that, but I'm freezing 2 whole bags of 4 ounces of milk each every day. Like, I have an oversupply, you guys, when I severely undersupplied the first time and still undersupplied the second time. I am blown away by this postpartum situation I have going on right now. And I'm going to finish this video now and go directly into filming a postpartum video because I want to talk about the things I did differently this time in case they offer any kind of tips for anyone and in case they actually did have an impact on my journey this time, both with postpartum mood and also with milk supply and stuff like that, because I just want to lock it into time because I've struggled hard with postpartum and with breastfeeding with my other 2 kids, and it has been so far a dream, an absolute dream this time. So that is my birth story of this little fellow, my little man. I am absolutely in love with him. He is my little buddy. He's attached to me 24/7. His siblings are in love with him, and life is really good. So thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned if you want to follow me on my postpartum journey. I'm going to be talking about mood stuff and breastfeeding stuff, and eventually going into doing a postpartum body rebuilding journey. I'm going to do a postpartum body shot in my next video where I talk about like breastfeeding and recovery and stuff like that. So if you're into that kind of thing, stay tuned because I'm going to put that up in the next one. But anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye guys.